career or his career on getting large
interrupt you
number.
for 1 second.
Yep.
Can we confirm? I just got a text message that maybe our
Yep.
volume's not working.
Audio is a deal.
So we're working on audio for a second here.
Okay, now we're on.
Okay,
All right,
we're on.
we're on,
Okay,
we're on.
perfect. So you were.
Yeah, so, no
I
worries.
think everything we
Introductions.
got.
All
said.
right, introductions.
Here we go.
Technical difficulties. You know, if something doesn't go wrong, you're not doing it right. So
Yeah,
but I'm
exactly.
Josiah Oleson, Director of Elections here at the Family Leader.
I'm John Dunwall. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement at the Family Leader. Also have the privilege of serving in the Iowa House and serve there as an Assistant Majority Leader, and I represent Jasper County District 38. We're here to talk about elections. It's been an odd year, a different year.
Mm-hmm.
First off, before we talk a little bit what's happening nationally with the presidential election, et cetera, Josiah, we've spent some time, you and I, going back and forth about people like us getting on and talking about elections and acting like we have some magical crystal ball. Do you think there's some limitations to that?
Oh, there's definite limitations, and what I would really encourage folks is don't buy into, I saw someone on TV and they saw a great Republican turnout at X random precinct in Philadelphia, or my cousin saw a great Democrat turnout in X rural precinct. At this point, it's all noise, and a lot of it is anecdotal, and even some of the real data, for example, the early vote numbers, we don't know how those people actually voted. We can know what their party registration is, but we don't know how they actually voted in the end. At this point, it's anybody's game.
So everyone should still get out and vote.
Yes.
Nothing we're going to say here should impact not voting.
No. At this point, you need to get out and vote. You also need to be texting your friends and family. As we continue the call, we're going to go over some key districts that will help try to jog your memory, see if you know anyone in these key districts, shoot them a text, shoot them a call, and make sure they turn out to vote. At this point, every vote matters.
You were mentioning when the sound wasn't working a little bit about President Trump's journey and what people were thinking early on when he announced that he was going to rerun for president again.
I mean, when you look at the polling data, early on in 2023, Ron DeSantis was a real challenger to him. There was a definite possibility that he did not wind up the nominee, but that all changed when Jack Smith indictments came down. It really changed the tenor of the race from, is Trump the best candidate to win, to are you with Trump or are you against him? It really solidified his base in a way that nothing else could have, and there's certainly no question that for everything that they have thrown at him, the indictments, the convictions, the fact that he's not in prison right now is incredible. I mean, he has what he's done. There's no denying that. It's absolutely fun, absolutely incredible. You know, I don't want to over spiritualize it, but we do believe that God controls all things, and by any standard, most of us would be in jail if we had that many indictments against us.
Yeah, you're not talking about the rightness or the...
Not talking about the rightness or the wrongness of it, but there is no denying that there's a God factor in this, right? There's always a God factor.
So were you surprised by the caucus? I mean, the fact that he dominated the caucus to the degree he did?
I didn't expect him to dominate it as largely as he did. I expected him to win. And obviously, I was a little biased in that whole thing, being a DeSantis supporter and on his team. But, I mean, the people spoke, and the people said what they had to say. And speaking personally, I voted for President Trump and did so gladly. So.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. One of the things I think we have to keep in mind, even as Iowans looking at the presidential race, it's a little bit different because after the caucuses finished here, there really hasn't been a tremendous amount of presidential activity like other states.
No, not really since 2016, and even 2020 there was some action in the state, but it was subdued compared to previous years, 2016, 2012, when Iowa was really a swing state. At this point, if Kamala wins Iowa, she doesn't need it, and if Trump is in danger of losing Iowa, then it's too far gone anyways. But we still have gotten some national attention with the congressional races.
Okay.
And I know one of the races some of the races that are outside Iowa. One of the things we've seen on a lot of the ballots that I know we wanted to cover has been the abortion ballot measures.
Yep.
That are up this
How many
year.
How many do we actually have going on right now? So like 11.
11.
Measures?
Yes.
So one state actually has two.
One state has two. So you see here we've got 3 of our neighboring states have measures on the ballot: Missouri, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Nebraska's unique. We'll be joined by someone here in a bit later this hour that will discuss the Nebraska case in particular. Nebraska has competing both a pro-life and a pro-abortion measure, which is obviously pretty unique. So we'll definitely see how that turns out.
Are you seeing any kind of, you think there's some kind of indication of how those are going, or and what the polling has been on those?
Yeah, so, and obviously here in a few minutes we'll be joined by Aaron DiPietro with our sister organization of Florida, and he'll discuss the Florida situation a little more in depth. Florida's unique in that most of these other states, you just got to get 50% of the ballots, 50% of the votes to pass. Now, most of the polling in these states, some of them we would obviously expect to look bad. New York, Maryland, it's understandable. Nevada, the polling has not been great. In Arizona, I haven't seen any materials out of Montana. The numbers out of South Dakota actually look pretty decent. Missouri's are hit and miss, so it'll be interesting to see where exactly that lines up. And Nebraska's odd in that right now the polling shows both of the measures passing,
Which means
that whichever measure gets the most votes would then be put in the Constitution.
and they're the opposite of each other.
One is establishing the heartbeat bill in their Constitution, and the other is, for lack of a better term, a kill 'em all bill. Just no restrictions on abortion at all. I would love to meet the voter that is going to vote for both of those. It's some interesting cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
but it really does exist.
Now,
So,
Josiah, are most of these states, these 10 states with the 11 measures, are these voter initiated? Are most of these coming because they got enough signatures, therefore it can go on the
yes,
ballot?
yeah, that's how it works.
And
Iowa doesn't
I
have
was
that.
different. We have to go through the House and the Senate.
Yeah, and honestly, if I can editorialize personally, I think that's a good thing, because the reality is most of the time these sort of measures are complex issues, and someone walks up to you in a parking lot and says, "Hey, please sign this. Here's my 20-second elevator pitch why." Well, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. It just unfortunately is. But looks like Aaron's going to be joining us. John, if you want to talk, while I get Aaron hooked up here.
So the fun part here, we've got some different colleagues across the nation that we're able to connect with to kind of get their perspective and understand a bit about what they're talking about. So we have actually someone from the Florida Family Policy Center, Aaron DiPietro. Is that pronounced correctly?
We'll ask him when he arrives.
and there's no doubt, if you've been looking at Twitter or Facebook, even the news media, you have seen Governor DeSantis and his team out there talking about voting against this measure. It's actually been part of the presidential. President Trump, as a Florida resident, was asked how he stood on the issue, and he supported DeSantis' position in the end, as he clarified that throughout his time. And so it'll be fun to kind of get a chance to hear from Aaron what he's seeing on the ground in Florida, because it does take more than 50% to get that particular ballot measure passed. And so if you see it go over that 60%, is it 60 or 65?
Yeah.
60% threshold.
Aaron.
There's Aaron.
Welcome
Hey, Aaron.
to the chat.
We're getting him hooked up here.
Can you hear me? Josiah?
He's getting his volume going.
Aaron, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Aaron?
I cannot hear you.
He doesn't hear us in terms of that. So
All right, let's try that again.
we're just looking at what we got. Both of them are on there. So, but the key is like I said, this is something that Governor DeSantis has been strongly campaigning against. I believe they have another ballot measure that has to do with
Marijuana.
and he has both been trying to stop both of those. The
you
marijuana
hear me?
one, I
I
think, is, he
cannot hear
feels
you
like there's
guys.
corporations behind it, where the abortion one,
Here, let's,
obviously, is his
pull that
pro-life
down
position.
again here.
So
Use your audio for your headphones.
What's that?
Audio for your headphones.
we're getting her going here.
Choose.
So, but anyways, so as we walk through the afternoon here a little bit, we're going to be talking to some of these different folks, but we're also going to be talking about some of the specific House and Senate races here in Iowa. We'll get a sneak peek at what's happening in the congressional races, or what we're seeing or hearing, or
Can you
issues
hear me,
There we go.
that are
Loud
impacting
and
it.
clear. There we
Awesome.
go.
All right, Aaron can hear us. We can't hear.
Okay, we're getting her
gee.
going here.
External headphones.
Good. How are you doing?
All right. Can we hear Aaron?
Can you hear me?
We got
Testing
her
1,
here.
2.
Aaron can hear us.
All right, here we go.
There we go.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, we got
All
you.
right.
Believe it.
So go ahead, Josiah.
All right, Aaron.
Introduce it.
Yeah, fill us in on what's going on down there in Florida.
So honestly, we are having historic turnouts here in the state of Florida, just across the board. Extremely high Republican turnout. We've never seen anything like it, honestly, in the state of
So
Florida.
Aaron, you think it's going to exceed 2020?
I think
16?
there's a very high likelihood. I think there's a very high likelihood. In terms of just the basic numbers right now, we're looking at, as of 12 noon Eastern time, we're looking at Republican voting turnout is near 43%, which is a record high. It's an 11-point lead over Democrat votes right now. It's about right now, I think it's 1.1 million vote Republican lead in terms of voter turnout this year. In terms of everything, election day voting, NPAs and third-party voters turnout actually exceeds Democrat turnout in terms of election day voter turnout, which is just stunning. So we're definitely seeing the red wave shift that has slowly been occurring in terms of the voter registration over the past 6 years, thanks to Governor Ron DeSantis here in the state of Florida.
How do you answer the cannibalizing question? Those early voting on the Republican side, conservative side are being cannibalized and will be disappointed in the election day turnout. How do you answer that question?
I would say right now, thus far, we're only halfway through the day. Actually, we've still got about five and a half hours left to go until polls close, and we're not seeing that at all. Republican turnout is nearly double Democrat turnout on election day voting. And again, right now on just election day voting, Democrat turnout is so bad, third-party voters and NPA voter turnout exceeds Democrat turnout on election day voting. So I'm really excited about the numbers we're looking at. It's nearly 50% of the turnout today has been GOP voters, which is absolutely never happened in Florida's history.
So what's the situation? I believe it's Amendment 3 is the marijuana amendment.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of insight as to the situation there? Because obviously I know that's one where the president and Governor DeSantis are on opposite sides of the issue.
Yes. So Amendment 3 is the amendment to legalize recreational marijuana, quote unquote. The reality is, and I think Governor DeSantis and a lot of other leaders, both in terms of law enforcement, business leaders, community leaders, and activists, have pointed out this is really a corporate pharmaceutical company grab. The amendment is specifically written to favor a handful of pharmaceutical companies that will be able to control the marijuana market here in the state of Florida. They have given themselves within this amendment complete criminal and civil liability immunity. So they have no accountability if this amendment passes into law. The prohibitions that were in our state constitution regarding medical marijuana are removed regarding recreational marijuana. There's no clear allowances for the state legislature to prohibit the public smoking of recreational marijuana, which would absolutely be disastrous to the Florida's image as a pro-family, pro-business tourism state. And we'd really see a lot of policies and a lot of just the environment looking more like Colorado or California. And so I think it's fascinating. We've had, I think, just one of the companies engaging in Amendment 3, one company put in $80 million. Wow. As one person pointed out, and there's like 3 or 4 major mega pharmaceutical corporations that are throwing the bulk of the resources. And I can guarantee you it's not out of the goodness of their heart that they want people to grow medical or recreational marijuana in their backyard. In fact, actually, that would actually still be prohibited under Amendment 3. It literally is a power monopoly grab by a handful of pharmaceutical companies. And it would be bad for business, bad for families, and bad for Floridians in general.
We were talking about thresholds of what to get an amendment passed through the ballot initiative. What is the threshold? 60%?
So Florida is very unique. I think we may be one of the only states, maybe one of 2 states, I think, to have a 60% voter threshold for passing constitutional amendments, which, from my perspective, I think it could even be higher. Changing your state constitution should be a very serious matter and not something that just can be willy-nilly tossed around by a simple majority, especially when we're considering a lot of the out-of-state special interests, billionaires, millionaires that are throwing millions of dollars into very deceitful and misleading ad campaigns on both, like, such as Amendments 3 and Amendments 4. So thankfully, we do have that threshold of 60%. We absolutely still need every conservative Christian to be able to get out and vote. vote their values, vote their conscience on this election day. Because I think honestly in Florida, as we've seen the partisan shift more toward the Republican side, I'm not concerned about the top of the ticket, President Trump and Senator Rick Scott. I am concerned. I believe the ballot initiatives are actually the most critical item, yeah, as far as Florida, is concerned in terms of how close it could go either way.
So if any of our listeners know anybody in Florida, I can shoot them a text, shoot them a call. What would be the closing pitch that you would want to give voters, particularly on Amendment 4?
Amendment 4, which, as you can see, I was just out putting out signs at different polling precincts on Amendment 4. Amendment 4 is probably the most dangerous amendment, not just on this year's ballot, but in recent Florida history. Amendment 4 would enshrine abortion on demand until the moment of birth. It is very extremely deceptively worded. The ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the George Soros-funded Open Society Foundation have poured literally tens of millions. I think it's approaching, they've already crossed 100 million in just one of the PACs. I think they're probably going to be cumulatively looking at 100, they've spent 120 to 140 million dollars pushing this agenda. It is dangerous. It will gut parental rights. Parental consent for minors will be removed from our state law. It actually removes doctors from the medical process as well, allowing non-medical healthcare providers, which is a term not defined. They would allow non-medical personnel to be able to perform late-term abortions, and it allows them to determine not just the life and that serious health threats to the mother, which is already currently allowed. Those exceptions are allowed under Florida's Heartbeat Protection Act. But the term patient's health, which is in Amendment 4, would open it up to even basic side effects of pregnancy, like morning sickness or mental stress or anxiety. Those are the items that could be the basis of affecting patient's health that could justify late-term abortion. And finally, it opens the door to taxpayer funding for elective abortions. I mean, Amendment 4 is a radical proposal. And if anyone watching has friends or family in the state of Florida, if nothing else, get out and vote no on Amendment 4, because it is absolutely devastating. It will be a generational loss, gutting every single pro-life victory we've had for the past 40 to 50 years in one instance.
And Aaron,
and it'll take generations to repair.
And Aaron, some of the early polling, or at least the gut feeling on the ground, this is going to be a close, correct? I mean,
it will be. It will be. I think definitely. I'm so grateful to Governor Ron DeSantis for taking the leadership and getting the word out about the dangerous amendment. Also, the Republican Party of Florida has put their money where their mouth is. They put, serious money into a television ad campaign. We've just got a lot of serious players. Florida Family Voice, the organization that I work with, the Florida Catholic Conference. All of these just different major players are coming together, staying on message. We're united. We're excited, but it is definitely going to come down to the wire here. So every vote absolutely counts in defeating them.
Well, that's definitely a race we'll be watching closely tonight, Aaron. Thank you so much, and Godspeed this evening.
Godspeed. Thank you guys for everything. What
thanks,
you're doing,
Aaron.
God bless.
I know as we get ready for our next call, I just want to remind everyone, hey, if you haven't voted yet, get out and vote. Don't put it off till later in the day. You never know if you're going to have a car problem, a flat tire, etc. You want to get it done as soon as possible. What a tremendous privilege we have in our country to have a say, to have a seat at the table, to get to participate in this. I'd love for us to see in Iowa here and across the country a record voter turnout. And I think everyone believes this is an important election, and therefore hopefully it's going to reflect that in the number of voters who go out and get a chance to express their voice. Thank you to all those who voted early. That's extremely important, and we've seen a tremendous turnout on both sides. Voting early makes a difference in terms of that. But any thoughts you have of what you're seeing out there and hearing from Aaron or else on these abortion ballot measures?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can really tell that we've, we need to work on our messaging going forward. You look at what happened 2 years ago in Nebraska, the failure we had there, and this is an important election for these ballot measures.
And wouldn't you probably agree as well, even though Iowa does not have some sort of abortion amendment on the ballot, the reality is it certainly has been a major issue that's been raised by those who don't share our conservative values and really believe that abortion one way or another is on the ballot. And so we do have to work on a messaging, have to figure out how we talk about this very important issue. And I think it's always, we have to be careful about ceding ground and just trying to avoid the issue, particularly when we know what it means that life does begin at conception. And the reality is we're just trying to argue about when it should be valued and protected.
And one of the things that's going to be interesting, and our next guest will be discussing this, right, is the route that the Nebraska pro-life groups took has been fascinating in that they have changed the discussion from a negative, we're just opposed to an amendment, to there's actually an amendment there for. So it'll be interesting to hear from him as soon as we get him on here in a minute.
So we're going to have Will Anderson.
William Anderson with Students for Life.
So someone who's been on the ground talking about this issue with voters, not just in terms of an amendment issue, correct?
Yep.
But just across the...
Will, can you hear us?
Both you and Mr. Dunwall just fine. How you guys doing?
Oh,
I'm doing
glad,
well, sir.
Glad to hear you, Will.
Looks like you're out. Are you out and about?
I am currently on the ground here at Metropolitan Community College here in Elkhorn, Nebraska.
Wow.
So yes, I am on the ground here.
So you're in that state that's got two different ballot initiatives on it, right?
Yes, yes, I do. It's a really confusing situation.
Tell us what they are, by the way. Inform us what they are.
So the two ballot issues that the state of Nebraska is facing are 434 and 439. Currently here in the state of Nebraska, what they have is protections up to 12 weeks, which in the womb, a child can feel pain starting at 12 weeks, with exceptions here in the state of Nebraska for rape, incest, and life of the mother. And so those two ballot issues that I mentioned, 434, is a ballot issue that seeks to put what they have currently here in the state of Nebraska and put that into the Constitution, set the ground level at 12 weeks, and it hopefully works its way back. The other one that is on the ballot here as well is 439, which is a ballot that would seek to enshrine abortion throughout all 9 months under any circumstance. So sex-selected abortions would become legal. It also eliminate any health procedures or health placements that like the state of Nebraska puts. Say like a hospital has to meet certain requirements. Planned Parenthood and other abortion vendors would no longer be required to meet those requirements.
Is there confusion with having two ballot measures that are so different from each other, expressing two different background experiences with it?
Absolutely. So there is some confusion on the ground, not just from community members. Our students, our volunteers have expressed some confusion with it. But the way that they've started doing wording is 434 and then no on 439. And so both sides are doing this for both of them. So Planned Parenthood and the ACLU have been saying no on 434, yes on 439, vice versa. And both of them have been doing the same advertising with green and red. So it does get a little confusing from both sides. And unfortunately, I think it was purposely done that way to confuse people, unfortunately. So there's a lot of confusion seen here on the ground here in Nebraska.
So I know, Will, one of the things we've talked about is some of the polling shows that there's at least a slice of the voters that are planning to vote for both of these ballot initiatives. While you're out there on the ground, if you had a chance to meet any of those voters, and if so, kind of an insight into what does that voter look like who's voting for both of these amendments?
So the people that are voting for both are the people that want, they are people that believe in having the quote unquote right to choose. And necessarily, it's not a right to choose because the baby's not choosing in this circumstance. But what we're seeing is, people that are, obviously pro-choice are going to be in support of 439 regardless, because unfortunately it is very broadly worded and very, confusingly worded. But mainly we're not seeing too many, pro-choice advocates vote for 434 because they want that unlimited range. The 434 is actually brought up mainly in has been proposed as the pro-life bill, and so that's on that side has got a negative connotation. So it's been heavily proposed by the Catholic Church, other churches here in the state of Nebraska, the local right to life groups and stuff like that.
So moving on to a couple of the other neighboring states, I know you're a former Iowa native, but now residing in Missouri. What's the situation on the ground there?
So I live in Kansas, but I help out heavily in Missouri. So what's going on with Missouri is they have a very lengthy law that seeks to do exactly what it is here in Nebraska that they're doing here. They're doing it in other states like South Dakota. They just did it in Ohio this last cycle. Again, seeking to enshrine abortion rights throughout all 9 months, regardless of circumstance, which would also open up the law for lack of accountability for sex trafficking and stuff like that. Something that we've seen in Ohio is we've seen people pose as the parent or guardian of their victims that are typically minors and go in and get an abortion because you would no longer a minor would no longer have to receive consent from their legal parent or guardian. And so that's what's happening, not just on the Missouri bill, but the Nebraska bill as well. We're seeing a huge influx of that very wording, as well as opening up for, it also mentions the right for reproductive rights. So that's also allowing for the the children doesn't need consent of the parent to have transgender reassignment surgeries and stuff like that. Well, which are things that Planned Parenthood are now offering.
So I know the third state that borders Iowa is South Dakota. Some of the polling numbers there have been encouraging. What are you seeing and hearing there?
So we are on the ground currently today. We're on the ground, like I said, on all states. So that we have these battlegrounds happening. So we're on the ground in South Dakota. Our students are feeling confident on it. South Dakota is, out of all the states, along with Florida, does have the greatest chance of beating this pro-abortion movement. And I do feel confident on South Dakota pulling it off.
So what are you actually hearing as people are discussing this in these states? What is what's the message that you're hearing back?
Yeah, so a lot of the people we're talking to is not informed. A lot of people I deal with and I talk to are college students. So you're on a college campus nowadays. You expect, we're told that colleges are supposed to be places that we get different thoughts put into our heads, and we talk to different people for different ideas. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The liberal agenda has taken over at our institutions, and so there are actually clubs. One of the campuses I work with at University of Nebraska Lincoln, they have a Planned Parenthood club there that has been pushing this 439 bill so far, just on campus at UNL. That's not just the city. That's targeting our students specifically. So we're seeing that everywhere. Especially another state that we're seeing that this isn't on the ballot, but Kansas right now has a huge not huge battleground after their unfortunately failed pro-life law that they tried passing right after Roe. But we're seeing an uptake in Planned Parenthoods. The newest one being in Pittsburgh, Kansas. They just opened up, targeting literally 2 minutes away from Pitt State College, which targets college students directly.
So you mentioned some of the wording about how some of these are complex. I know we've spoken about Missouri, the sort of gymnastics that the state went through as far as writing the language. Give us an insight just as to how slanted the language wound up being in Missouri for the pro-abortion people.
Absolutely. So originally, this bill, the original wording was very pro-life and was outright similar to how Amendment 4 is written in Florida, where they have this will all be taxpayer funded and stuff like that. And that was written by Attorney General Jay Ashcroft. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court threw out those words and stated that Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, and their lawyers were able to write it instead, and they went with that wording rather. And there was a debate. We actually just saw this recently down in Arkansas. And Nebraska and Missouri both tried to litigate it the same way. Nebraska actually kicked off this very ballot off their ballots because of the double standard of multiple issues on the ballot itself. So, because of the broad wording, the state of Missouri and Nebraska both attempted to kick off these terrible, horrible, and horrific extremist ballots. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court just didn't side with them. They didn't see the reasoning of why. Of how it could be interpreted to have multiple meanings, if that makes sense.
So obviously, with these 3 states bordering Iowa, I can guarantee that some of our viewers know people in one of these 3 states. What would be your closing pitch to our viewers shoot a quick text, phone call to your friend, your family member in these states. What should they tell them?
Absolutely. So the number one thing that you should do is obviously to look at pro-life candidates. I'm not going to tell you to vote pro-life, but you should definitely look into people that share the values and that are truly conservative and want to push off these pro-life values, if that makes sense. So absolutely look at your candidates. There's nothing more important. These elections happened. These ballots were able to get on there because they allowed liberal lawmakers to get into the House. There's nothing more important than our local elections, and everybody needs to be participating in those.
Well, appreciate the insight, and that just reminds us, take a time before you walk into the voting booth, look at some of the resources so you can understand some of the ballot initiatives that happen to be out there, get some advice, get some counsel, but the most important thing is to engage, because it literally, we're talking about life and death on the ballot when it comes to these types of issues. We'll appreciate the work you're doing across the Midwest here, and particularly this election cycle. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. It's great to see you guys. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thank you,
All
Will.
right.
God bless.
Good day.
God bless
Well,
you guys. Thank you.
let's shift a little bit here, and let's start talking a little bit about Congress. I think sometimes we get so focused, and rightly so, it's important, upon the top of the ticket, who's going to be president, but it's pretty clear as we've watched history and knowing how our government works, you got to get things through the House, you got to get things through the Senate, and as well the president. So it's not something that we should take lightly.
No.
And we're going to talk a little bit in a few moments here about how competitive some of the races for U.S. House have been here, particularly in the 1st and the 3rd district. But the reality is, talk to me a little bit about congressional control.
I mean, nobody has any real idea of who's going to wind up and control the House tonight. There's simply too many seats that are jump balls, if you will. It's anybody's guess. I think the most confident I saw any predictor this morning was one of them had Republicans at 54% chance of control, which that's not great odds.
But no one right now, at least,
it's very narrow margin. We have right now Republicans have the narrowest of the margins of control there in the U.S. Congress, and the reality is, obviously, right, they get a lot of hate. You go back to whether it be John Boehner, Paul Ryan, whoever is in charge, Nancy Pelosi, whoever's in charge, they're getting a ton of hate for the sort of legislation they're passing, which is, we won't dive into that. It's neither here nor there. But the reality is, if you want to pass your agenda, particularly if you're a President Trump, you need a majority in the House. And if you're President Harris, you need a majority in the House. It might not be as cool or as sexy as controlling the Senate. The House isn't confirming any judges. But guess what? If you don't have the House, you're not getting stuff done. You may not like it, but you need the votes.
And most people who are talking about, particularly the House, they feel like it's either going to be a very small margin of control of the Republicans or a small margin of control of the Democrats. Not a lot are predicting some widespread, massive change.
And that certainly could happen. One of the things I've been saying for the past week has been that statistically, a close election is very unlikely. It's obviously within the realm of possibility, but you almost get the feeling with the race this close that it's either going to break great for the Democrats or it's going to break great for the Republicans. It's the odds of it being somewhere in the middle probably aren't all that great. I do think whoever winds up with congressional control, I'm guessing it's going to be a larger margin than what Republicans have now, larger than the Democrats had in 2020, but probably not any sort of 2016 or 2006, 2008 margins by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, Senate's a little bit different picture in the sense of the Democrats are defending more seats. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. We can definitely get to that. I wanted to highlight.
Oh yeah.
We've got 2 races here in Iowa that are obviously pretty close. I live in 3rd District, where Congressman Zach Nunn is facing a very close race against Lenon Bakam. If you've ever been on the internet lately, you've seen the ads. And then you reside in the 1st District, where I used to reside, my hometown, and that's where Marionette Miller Meeks is in for the second fight of her political life,
Yeah.
given that she won by 6 votes back in 2020. Give us a little insight into the Miller Meeks race.
Yeah, so Miller Meeks race, I think there's a couple things to take in consideration. Number one, she had a stronger primary fight than anyone anticipated, meaning it wasn't an overwhelming vote toward her, and so that kind of hurt a little bit when you had, a really unknown person actually making a showing. The second thing I think we've talked about here in the office is what makes some of the congressional districts different is in District 1, there are not as many contested Iowa House and Iowa Senate races.
And so many people forget about that county right there, the People's Republic of Johnson County.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that really is what shifts the district quite a bit is when you take a look at Johnson County. So without having a lot of competitive House and Senate races, you don't have a lot of media, a lot of energy going into those that do impact up ballot.
Yeah.
It's not always the down up ballot impacting the down ballot.
And speaking of the local House and Senate races, we're going to be discussing those here in a bit. If there's a local House and Senate race you'd like to hear us talk about or mention, I believe the comments are open on YouTube, so feel free to drop that race in the comments and we'll try to get to it. So back to the first district.
So it really is that Iowa City area that is a challenge for Miller Meeks. And it's always been a challenge. This is the first and the third are considered toss-up seats every election. What's interesting is those 2 congressional districts are probably in the top 10 contested races in the nation. So when the Democrats look at taking control of the U.S. House, they look at that working its way through taking these seats away from Iowa and putting them back in the hand of Democrat control. The reality is flipping a seat's never easy. Mm-hmm. The reality is Representative Miller Meeks has worked hard to retain that seat and has been out and about all over the district because I, obviously campaign in part of the district as well and see her all over the place. And it's a pretty significant thing that if that changes parties, it can take 6 to 10 years to get back.
So I know we've definitely got, I'm almost certain we've got viewers here on who, they'd had some concerns about some of Miller Meeks' votes, and I won't go into that, but I know, John, you've had some disagreements with her votes as well, but you decided to support her. Speaking as Representative John Dunwall,
Yep.
What would your closing pitch be to the voters in that district?
Well, it'd be simply this. First off, we had a primary, and we had a chance to have an open discussion. We had a chance to have a competition, and Representative Miller Meeks won that overwhelmingly with 60% of the vote. Secondly, if you are someone who's unhappy with a decision or a vote that Representative Miller Meeks has taken, this is the time to help her win that election and get a chance to speak in her ear and get a chance to influence her. If you don't like where she's at, a year and a half from now, you always can engage in another primary against her. And finally this, if you are someone who is looking at the top of the ticket and you believe that the top of the ticket should be the same party that Representative Miller Meeks is from, then the reality is that top of the ticket, that President Trump is going to need the support of the U.S. House to get anything done. And so here's the reality is we had a competition. She came out on top. Number 2, help her win, speak in her ear, influence her. Number 3, don't forget there's a primary that'll come up in a year and a half again. You're going to have a chance to express your displeasure or a different direction at that point. And number 4, the top of the ticket's going to need the support of the U.S. House to get anything done.
Absolutely. So I wanted to, we'll switch over real quickly to the U.S. Senate races, which, the last 2 election cycles, Republicans felt pretty good about their chances in the Senate. We lost we lost one of the Georgia seats in 2020, and then we lost the second one in 2022. And obviously 22 was very disappointing. A lot of us expected a red wave. We didn't get the Senate seats in Arizona, Pennsylvania. I mean, it was very, very difficult. And the fact is, there's a real possibility that Kamala Harris is president tomorrow. And it's going to be very interesting if you're a Republican. It's pretty important to see who's gonna control that Senate because that can be a real firewall against some of her policies. if she does get elected. So this is 270 to win, a good site that tracks the races, and this is their aggregate of where seats are at based on some of the prognosticators that have put their work together. And a couple of races that I know we wanted to highlight was, one is this Nebraska Senate seat that has really come into picture recently. It's been interesting to say the least. So you've seen the Democrats do this a couple of times in the past decade. They did it. I remember notably in Kansas, one of the states they did it in. But there's an independent running in Nebraska named Dan Osborne, who is an air quotes independent. He's using the Act Blue fundraising site, which is the Democrats' fundraising site. He's supported by the Democrats, but running this bizarre campaign. He's running ads attacking Deb Fischer, the incumbent Republican, attacking her for not being pro-Trump enough. So it's going to be an interesting seat to watch. It really is a catch-22.
Is he pro-Trump?
Well, who knows, right? So it's a catch-22 for him. It's going to be an interesting seat to watch because on one hand, the math works out great, right? Well, I win the Democrat votes, but because I'm masquerading as an independent, I'll get some independent and Republican votes, and we'll win this seat because obviously you're in a deep red state like Nebraska, you're not winning it without some independent Democrat votes. The problem is when you do your appealing to the Republicans, well, all of a sudden some of these Democrats out here, he's running ads right now talking about how he's going to build the wall. Well, there's plenty of Democrats in Omaha who, if he had a D next to his name, wouldn't bat an eye, would fill in the ballot next to him. But what do you? I thought this guy was supposed to be a Democrat. And he wants to build a wall on the southern border. And then, of course, there's some work that he's doing on the side to, there's also been some efforts to shore up the Democrat base. And I think in the end, the Republicans are gonna pull that one off. But it's gonna be a close margin for sure, and closer than we need it to be.
What's happening in Montana?
So Montana, John Tester has been a long-standing Democrat politician up there. He has had the good fortune of running during good cycles for Democrats. So ran in 6, 12, and 18. So 2006, obviously, Democrat wave year. 2012, Obama on the ballot. 2018, another Democrat wave year. This might be time up for him though. With Trump on the ballot, Trump's going to win that state handily, and there are ticket splitters, right? We talk about Joe Manchin in West Virginia, who's retiring this year, but he's enjoyed success with ticket splitters in the past. But it doesn't seem that John Tester is going to be able to replicate that vote margin this year. Sorry, Kristen, you cannot use our.
She's on the wrong one.
Another state that, Glenn, can you get this off the TV? Another state that we want to highlight is Ohio. So this is another state that Trump is going to win, and you've got a longtime Democrat incumbent in Sherrod Brown, who is running there. Some of the recent polling data shows that race has gotten into, the map shows toss-up margins, and there's a real chance that Republicans pick off that seat. It's so important right now. If you wind up with 51 votes, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, Republicans hang on to Ted Cruz in Texas, they hang on to Rick Scott in Florida, which, from what Aaron told us, seems to be where things are leaning. Nothing silly happens in Nebraska. We're at 51 seats. Well, here's the problem. You're then dependent on Lisa Murkowski out of Alaska and Susan Collins out of Maine to be in a lot of tie-breaking votes.
And that's not a good place for us to be.
That is not, and we'll discuss.
They get to be
Lisa
Joe Manchin to some degree.
Yes. So we would rather not have that, speaking personally, and so it's going to be important that you have at least 52, if not 53 votes in a Senate. Again, if there is a president.
And that's why Montana and Nebraska, or Montana specifically, be important.
Well, Montana and then Ohio, and then these three states that are in the lean Democrat category at the moment, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. We've got good candidates in all of these states.
Okay.
But the reality is all three of these states, as we'll discuss with Bob when he comes in, are on a razor's edge on the presidential race. And the reality is it's probably going to go with that presidential race. So whoever wins those states in the presidency is probably going to take those states in the Senate as well. There's going to be a little bit of ticket splitting. You got people like Bob Casey in Pennsylvania who have long-standing name ID in that state. So you're going to have probably some Trump Casey voters. But at the end of the day, it's going to ride with the presidential.
We're feeling pretty comfortable in Florida, you said, with Scott.
Well, and that's what our sources in Florida
Or
are telling us.
telling
So.
And Texas, a lot of attention. 30 days ago, there seemed to be some hand-wringing with Senator Cruz, but it seems like he's defined his message, picked his lane, and appears to be doing better there.
Yeah, it's an expensive state to play in, right? So you saw when the Democrats started to think that Nebraska was in play, they went in, spent some money to support the independent, and it's relatively cheap, right? You got the Omaha media market, and other than that, you got some pretty small media markets. Texas, $1 million doesn't even get you started, right?
Yeah.
It is a very, very expensive state to play in. So for the Democrats, right, if you're looking for that, let's say you lose Montana, but you still want to get to 50 seats, you're better off probably trying to pick off a Nebraska or some state with a cheaper media market. It is really expensive to get involved in those states. But I think it's going to be a close race. I mean, Ted has definitely had his electoral problems there in Texas, so it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Arizona, Nevada.
Nevada, we have a great candidate. We really do in Sam Brown, speaking again as a Republican. Nevada's an odd state. It is one of the few states where Trump has actually underperformed his polls historically, going back to 16 and 20. We came very close in 2022 to unseating Senator Cortez Masto out of Nevada. Arizona, speaking personally,
High-profile candidate.
high-profile
from
candidate,
the past,
yes.
not as much this election cycle.
What else can you say? And the reality is it probably would be closer with a different candidate. Say what you will about her as a candidate, it's pretty clear that there's a lot of people who have built-in viewpoints about her, whether positive or negative. People have very strong feelings. And the reality is there are going to be people in Arizona who are going to vote Trump for president, and then Ruben Gallego, the Democrat, for U.S. Senate. So that's going to be a seat. It bears watching for sure, but I would say that personally, if I were a betting man, I would be more interested in where these 3 seats go versus where these 2 go.
So you feel looking at Nebraska and Montana as real opportunities, obviously assuming Texas and Florida go the route, and then looking at those top purple states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, which will be impacted dramatically by the presidential outcome. As the top of the ticket goes, you see the Senate race following in suit.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty fair estimate, and obviously there's going to be some variance, right? We could wind up a situation where Trump wins Pennsylvania by 1/10 of a point, and Republicans lose the Senate seat by 1/10 of a point, but it's going to track pretty closely. Is what I would be banking.
And just to clarify, as you open this discussion up, you're not saying we're going to have a president Kamala Harris. That's not your prediction. What you're saying is it can go either way.
Oh, it can go either way. I'm so regardless,
prepare.
right? If you're the Republicans, right? You want more than 52 seats because you don't want to have to wait on Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins when it comes to confirming judges passing controversial legislation. If you're the Republicans and you wind up with President Kamala Harris, well, you don't have 51 or 52 because you don't want Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski kind of jumping ship on you.
And there's going to be a leadership change in the Senate.
Yes.
McConnell has indicated he's not going to be running for leadership, correct?
Yes.
And I don't know if Iowans realize how high up in leadership Senator Ernst is.
Mm-hmm. He's the number 4?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
3 or 4.
3 or 4,
right?
yeah.
And she's pretty significant. And then you look at, obviously, Senator Grassley with his long history and influence on influential committees. It's amazing the influence that Iowa has, particularly in the U.S. Senate, when it comes to leadership and influence. It's pretty significant.
Yeah.
So, and she's not up for till 2 more years, correct?
Yeah, no, she's not up for 2 more years.
Has she fully declared yet?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So I did want to point out, so just recently, so Guam holds a non-binding straw poll, so they don't get any electoral votes because they're a territory, not
Here you go. You're going to
not a presidential state. But we have votes. They don't count.
Yeah.
Well, they count, but they don't matter.
Yeah.
So in the Guam presidential straw poll, which just closed a little while ago, Kamala Harris won with 49.46% of the vote. opposed to President Trump's 46.22% of the vote. That is a almost 10% improvement for Donald Trump over the previous election in 2020 when he only got, or 5% improvement when he only got 41% of the vote. So make of that what you will. It absolutely means nothing,
What
but
do you call
there are
this?
numbers. There are numbers. So
Yeah, this is one of those things that you kind of scratch your head at and say, what does it really tell us? We don't know at all, in all reality.
No, we don't. So I mentioned Lisa Murkowski earlier, and
Yep.
I wanted to discuss. So there are a ton of House races. So we cannot even begin to go through them all. But I wanted to highlight one of the interesting House races is out here in Alaska.
And look at the number of, just first
Just
off,
so
look
many.
at that
Oh
map.
my gosh, yes.
When you look at geography,
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. But so Alaska's a unique state in that they use ranked choice voting.
And it's on the ballot, my understanding.
Yeah, so
got a
a
sister
lot
that
of
lives there,
a lot
so.
of people. Yeah, so I have a family. My in-laws all live in Alaska. They are. I've heard many times about how much they hate the ranked choice voting there.
My family's the same.
But can you give our viewers a 30-second rundown of how ranked choice voting works?
Well, that's part of the problem. To really understand how it works. And think about this. You're ranking your preferences, your first, and each state has a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
But it's your ranking who you want for number 1 choice, number 2 choice, number 3 choice. And they go through that process to determine who gets the most momentum toward them. And so this is a calculation that's done. And so one of the problems with ranked choice voting is there's a lack of clarity in the voter's mind as to what they're really voting on and how those results are actually calculated or tabulated. So you may get the majority or the greatest number of votes, but you may not actually win the election because there were number 2 and 3 votes that came in higher for someone else. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
It's goofy.
It is a complicated system.
And that's part of the problem.
So yeah, and Alaska and Maine are 2 of the most bizarre political systems.
Yeah.
So again, Lisa Murkowski, Republican senator from Alaska, longtime political family up there. So we really have kind of a clash of political families going on in Alaska. So on one hand, you have the Murkowski family, and the Murkowskis, despite being elected Republicans, seem to be backing. So they at least publicly backed. I believe they have as well this time. Are publicly backing the Democrat Mary Peltola. Mary actually worked for Senator Murkowski for a while on one of her campaigns. On the Republican side, you have Nick Begich, who, if any of you remember the Begich name, they were a Democrat political family that was out of Alaska for a long time. The grandfather who kind of started the political line, he actually died in a plane crash with Speaker Boggs in the I believe it was 1960s or 70s when that happened. It was a high-profile case. But it's going to be interesting this time around because again you have that ranked choice voting, and so you've got 2 other candidates that are running on the ballot. One who is kind of being propped up by the Republicans, one who's being propped up by the Democrats to try and steal votes away. And the reality is Alaska is an odd state to put into one box. You have, if you look at their state legislature makeup, the governing coalitions that are created up there, they never fall equally among party lines. It is a bizarre and unique case. But the reality is, when again you look at how close that the control is, that it literally could come down to a seat like this, where because of the ranked choice voting calculations, it very well may be a week before we know who wins that congressional seat.
And like I said, the biggest problem I have, there are many problems, is it's confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at trying to create integrity in our elections, trying to build a sense of confidence in the voter. And when you have to depend upon a calculation to determine who the ultimate winner is, it becomes disenfranchising for the voter.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift our discussion a little bit. Let's start looking here at the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
And right now in the Iowa House and Iowa Senate, the makeup is this. There are 64 Republicans out of 100 in the Iowa House, and there's a supermajority. 34 out of 50 are Republican in the Senate. Why is that supermajority so important?
Well, as you well know, the Governor Reynolds right now, so the governor gets to appoint a certain number of department heads and department chairs. And right now they have to be confirmed by the Senate. which obviously creates some balance there. Let's say we'd wound up with a Governor Fred Hubble in 2018. Obviously, Republicans would have wanted to check on who he's appointing to these positions. But right now, the Democrats seem to be, again speaking personally, prior to when Republicans got the supermajority 2 years ago, seem to be abusing it a little bit, if you will. He's shooting down people for no particular reason other than we don't like them. So it is crucial that we again speaking. Well, I guess I can speak with family leader. It is crucial that we keep Brad Zahn in the state Senate, who we at Family Leader have endorsed. And he is running in Senate District 22, which comprises parts of Urbandale, parts of, we have a few precincts of Des Moines. Let me pull that map up real quick, John. We'll throw it up here for folks.
And just remind people, as you pull that map up, these maps were redrawn, trying to make each of the Senate districts equal and the House districts equal.
After the 2020
election. So Senator Zahn, who's always been someone who has performed well, his district changed a bit.
Yeah.
And the demographics
So this is the
of it
first
changed.
time we've had an election in this Senate district. So there are people in this district who may not have ever had a chance to vote for Brad Zahn. But this is a key race. It really is. You look at Brad's career and what he's done for, not just our issues, but for family values as a whole, and has worked so hard for the state of Iowa and really committed his life to it. If you look, even back at the beginning of his career when he was part of city government, right? That's it. Let's be honest, that's a thankless job. No one is becoming famous because they're mayor of a small town, and they're sure as heck not getting paid to do it. Brad really cares.
He's been a leader on conservative issues,
yes.
put himself out there, taken the forefront. And his district, just the way we draw them, and I really like how we do it here in Iowa, though, he now is in a district that if you're looking at what happened in the last presidential election, I mean, it was like +9.
Yeah, Biden won it by almost 10 4 years ago.
So he's had to work hard.
He's had to work hard, and the good news is because of his name ID and he's worked so hard, he has put himself in a real position to win this seat, even while we expect Kamala Harris to presumptively win this district at the presidential level tonight. But again, for our viewers, if you live in this district, get out and vote. But two, if you know someone in this district, text them to get out and vote. Call them, remind them to vote. It is so important. Again, it doesn't seem like much, right? The difference between a supermajority and majority doesn't seem that important. But one of the things we've talked about, right, is how we've been really impressed with some of the department heads that the governor has appointed, and some of those appointments don't happen
Without having the 34.
without having a Republican supermajority.
This is a race we probably looked at the beginning of the time the race really began and had a lot of question marks about, had a lot of concerns about. But we have become more and more positive about this race because of, first off, the strategy that Brad and his work ethic that he's put into there and his ability to get crossover votes.
Yeah. Well, and not just his, but Representative Eddie Andrews, so you get, the way the maps are drawn is there's 2 House districts nested within each Senate district. So everything, if you can see that blue line, everything to the north side is Representative Eddie Andrews, and he's someone who's demonstrated many elections in a row now the ability to connect with people who are voting Democrat on the presidential and congressional level. But another candidate that we've endorsed, and another very important race. And Democrats definitely want to go after him. And but yeah, there's a couple other races that I want to highlight real quick. But Eddie is definitely one of those races. Another one of your colleagues in the House that Democrats are going hard after right now is Bill Gustav.
Man, and Bill's been a leader on education issues, and as well has worked tirelessly in homeschool. He's been an advocate in those areas, been a very effective first-term legislature, lawyer, well-known, and he seems to be the #1 target for the Senate Democrats.
If you look at where the Democrats have put their money in the last couple of weeks, it's clear that he's their #1 target. And credit where credit is due on a political level. They had a good nominee, and again, credit where credit's due. She's run a good campaign. By all political measures. Bill's run a good campaign as well, and I think this one is going down to the wire. this one is definitely going to be too close to call. So if you're, again, if you live in this district, if you know someone in this district, I think it'd be fair to say it'd be a loss. It'd be a definite loss if Bill were to go down. So, his district comprises all of Altoona. We got a couple of precincts of Des Moines, and then the two southernmost precincts of Ankeny and Sailor Township in between.
So I'm going to come back to the Iowa House. I do want to just shift a little bit because we got a chance to have Bob share some thoughts and insights here, and we can come back to the House and the Iowa House and Iowa Senate and finish up our discussion because there's some important issues there. So I'm going to invite Bob Vander Plaats to come on, and I'm going to move over. Is that what I'm going to do? Or just move my chair? What's the easiest thing to do?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you.
As you can see, folks, this isn't live time. We're not recording.
We need a commercial break.
Yes.
There we go. Come on, Bob.
If you want to sponsor,
That's your chair.
Call us.
That's your chair. Oh, you got to have a place for the coffee cup.
You got
I
a
got.
place for the coffee cup,
Coffee
the whole
cup.
deal. How we doing, guys?
We are doing good.
I was just enjoying listening to this.
You got a pretty smart guy over
You got
here.
a very smart guy, and then you give good commentary, like ice cream, filling the gaps, right? But we want Bill Gustav to win, guys. So if you're in that district, I know that you guys are just recapping that district. If you're in that area, get out there to vote. Make sure your friends and neighbors get out to vote. We need you in that race.
And it really has been a race that both sides have spent a lot of money. So people who are watching any of the airwaves have seen the commercials on both sides of this. And I'll tell you, you ran for office, Bob. I ran for office again. This is a political junkie over here. I mean, it is hard to watch ads because they do have a tendency to stretch the truth a little bit, don't they?
Church is able to host all three services, and that's just basically welcome, give them some announcements. And I talked about the election coming up, and I said, and you know what, guys, Wednesday's coming, and there'll be no more ads. And that was a applause line at church. No more ads. They're all sick of the ads.
I was with Senator Bolton the other night for dinner, and obviously the other side of the
Sure.
aisle to me. We had dinner together with a group of other legislators on a particular issue, and he was telling me that they were trying to buy ad space, and it was all purchased. So that means that it's one after another. There's no more way they can squeeze in on certain channels.
So all these TV stations are doing really
a good
that's why
year.
we need
Yes.
commercial breaks.
There we go.
So we can also get some of that ad revenue in here.
We'll get that going for next year.
Yeah.
But let's shift a little bit. We'll come back to the House and the Senate and the Iowa here in a second here. But let's talk a little bit about presidential race. And Bob, you've been involved. I mean, one of the things that you have is an opportunity to engage so many of these candidates, particularly on the conservative side, who just feel like they want to come here, engage with you, talk with you, get a chance to influence them. What are you seeing out there right now? What's your thoughts on Election Day as you kind of look at where we are?
I feel pretty confident, but there's no doubt there's a heaviness in the air. I tell people, it's kind of interesting. We have this weather in Iowa right now. It just seems like this heavy, wet. It's just kind of the mood right now. A lot of people want this election to be over with. There's a lot of them that, quite frankly, they're not excited about the choices, but they see this is probably the starkest worldview difference election in our lifetime. And so, I was very confident going in. I just told Steve Desch yesterday, I think Trump's going to knock on the door of 300 electoral college votes tonight. I think he'll win the popular vote. Then you get to today and you're kind of like, I don't know if he can get there. You just start playing that game with yourself. And the more things I read, the more confused I get. But everybody's saying, I don't care if you're CNN or if you're Fox, you're Nate Silver, you're Real Clear Politics, they're all saying this could be a razor's edge election. But if it breaks one way, if the polling is off one way where they oversampled Trump's turnout or they oversampled Kamala's turnout, you could get a landslide for either one of them. Because then all of a sudden, all those toss-up races start going one way. So it'll be an interesting night tonight. I'm really going to look at Georgia being one of the first states that come in. When Georgia comes in, if Trump wins that one, feel good, don't feel great. He needs to win that one. Yeah. But if Kamala wins that one, that's going to be a problem. And Georgia is that's a tough state. Remember, Trump lost it. We lost a special election in 2021, 2 seats that we should have won. So there's just a lot of things that play right now nationally we're taking a look at. Obviously, we're doing our part of everything we can to get the church's voice to be the dominant voice at the voting booth today.
So I know one of the things that we've highlighted earlier on the show has been the life amendments, and obviously a lot of our sister organizations are involved. What do you see going down tonight with a lot of these amendments that are on the ballot?
Well, Nebraska's hard to say because they basically have two amendments on the ballot. But Nebraska's a pro-life state, so I expect either way it's going to be a pro-life amendment there. I think South Dakota's going to be in good shape. Florida, I think, is going to be in good shape. And the reason I think Florida is going to be in good shape is that 60% threshold. If we didn't have the 60% threshold in Florida, I don't think we win that amendment.
Can I just add one thing, too?
Yeah.
I think also someone underestimated is, and the governor, he's taken a leadership role.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's not quiet about it. He's out there in front.
Yeah. And what we saw, both of you and then me as well, is with Governor DeSantis, not only is he willing to be a bold leader in and of himself, but he has a huge asset in Casey DeSantis.
Yeah.
And Casey's been a huge voice. I mean, if you follow her on Twitter or see what she's doing for that amendment, but they're showing some real leadership. I think Florida is going to be good. I think Arizona could be tough. I would like to see them win. My peer in Arizona, Kathy Herod, says, we're close, it's all going to come to turnout. I think Trump's going to perform well in Arizona, which should help out the life amendment. If Trump performs really well, he may carry that life amendment over with him, and he might carry Kerry Lake over with him as well. Because Kerry Lake is down in the polls. But again, I can't believe if Trump does well in Arizona, that those same people are going to vote against Kerry Lake and vote against the life amendment.
Yeah. So what other races, or is there any, particularly in the U.S. Senate, obviously U.S. House, I know we both reside in Zach Dunn's
Sure.
district. Are there any congressional races, whether those be U.S. House or U.S. Senate, that you're going to be watching closely tonight?
Well, I really want to see what Miller Meeks does. I know she's in a tough race and a tough year, and but nobody outworks Marinette Miller Meeks. She's going to be door knocking right up till the final vote is probably cast. So I'm going to watch that one. Zach Dunn, I expect him to win. It'll be close, but I expect him to win. I think he's run a great campaign. He's a great candidate. I think Ohio. I see that seat getting flipped. I think is it Senator Sherrod there
Sherrod
right
Brown.
now. I believe he gets defeated by the businessman. I can't think of the last name right
Bernie
now.
Moreno.
Bernie Moreno. I met Bernie Moreno. Matter of fact, Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance, and I all spoke at the same event. And Bernie Moreno then was in a primary working the crowd, about vote for him to be a primary candidate against Sherrod. But he's proven himself to be a very, very good candidate. So I think that's a key one. I think Montana is definitely going to flip. And I think they'll go into the Republican Conference. I see the Republicans. Matter of fact, if you watch Nate Silver with 538 or Real Clear Politics, I think everybody's in agreement that the Republicans are going to take control of the Senate. The House is up for grabs, and the presidency is up for grabs. Those are going to be the two big things you're going to want to watch tonight.
Let's make one comment on Miller Meeks, too, that I should have made earlier. I live in the district. I'm out
Sure.
and about, and I'm out. And I'm not, obviously, I'm biased because of my party a little bit, but I was talking to a reporter yesterday, and the observation I made is I have not seen Bohannon out in the district.
Yeah.
She doesn't leave that safe area of Johnson County and that area, and it doesn't go to the rural areas. That means she's put all of her eggs and everything she's doing into winning Johnson County and not worrying about the rest. And that's hard on a voter.
Yeah, it is.
When you don't even think we're valuable enough to come out and engage and hold meetings. I'm not saying she hasn't been at all, but there seemed to be agreement from across the board that she's not been out and about, and kind of has almost run what I call the Biden campaign, hiding in the basement doing ads, rather than being out and about.
Or running from the University of Iowa campus.
There you go,
in order to do
exactly.
that. But when I take a look at Miller Meeks and I take a look at Bohannon, it reminds me of a guy that's passed away now, but Marvin Pomerantz was big in the Republican politics. And when I was first thinking about running for governor, and Terry Branstad was courting me to meet all these people, and Governor Ray was, Marvin Pomerantz said to me, he said, "Are you willing to run twice?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, most likely you'll get beat your first time, are you willing to run the second? I said, well, I want to win my first time. He goes, I get that. He said, but most likely you'll get beat. Are you willing to run again? Because a lot of candidates who run their second time are successful. Now, Miller Meeks, I don't know how many times she has ran, but finally she got success. Bohannon's kind of that same way right now. You know, she's run before, now she's run again. She's relying a lot on the TV ads. So we'll see, but that'll be a key district that I'll want to watch tonight at home.
I think the hardest thing in all these races, again, is I get the mailers in there, and they don't tell you enough about who the candidate is. I mean, they're distortions.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I know both of them. Now, I don't know Bohannon well. I served in the House with her. But she is progressive.
Yeah.
And Miller Meeks is conservative. They are vastly different from each other.
You know, I know Chuck Hurley's not here right now, but way early in the day, I was really, I mean, in my career in politics, I was really disheartened by it. How can you be that dishonest and let people, to say stuff to people? And Chuck said to me, when he said, Bob, if they're willing to kill babies, they're willing to lie at any cost.
Yeah.
He said, so just he goes, you have to understand, we can't play the same way they play, so to speak. The other race I want to point out, this one will be in the win column for Republicans, but it's a race I'm going to watch, and that is Ted Cruz's race in Texas.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Texas is changing. And a lot of people think, well, it's the illegal immigration that's changing Texas. I would counter, it's the corporate migration that's changing Texas. So Rick Perry and other governors, Governor Abbott, they have created a great tax and regulatory climate there. So a lot of businesses from California are moving into Texas. And with that, they take their employees. And those employees don't leave their values back in California, they take them into Texas. So I think Cruz will be successful in Texas, but I want to see how close that race is. I want to see where the pockets are at that point, because Texas is changing. And for those listeners and viewers who are going, you know, I'm very interested in this. I want leadership for our country. I want for the sanctity of human life and marriage and family and religious liberty and economic prosperity. I get that, but then you better watch Texas. Because if Texas changes, that map doesn't work out anymore for Donald Trump. That map doesn't work out for whoever your presidential candidate is. If Texas turns, it's going to be awfully hard to win if you're a conservative Republican moving forward.
For sure. Is there anywhere, I don't know, will you be on anywhere tonight? Or can people follow your Twitter to kind of see what you're thinking as
they
goes
can follow my Twitter, American Family Radio, who's a good friend of ours. They called me and said, would I be available for comment throughout the night? And so I'll be on American Family Radio from time to time throughout this process. So there's some other national reporters who basically said, hey, can we text you to see what your pulse is? But I'm just going to be watching this thing a lot tonight. I think it's intriguing. Our country's at a crucial intersection, and which way are we going to choose to go leadership-wise? And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the church's voice was heard, and on November 6th, that we all understand what our real hope is. It's not in a candidate or a party or the White House or a U.S. House. It's in the King of Kings. And so once they start governing, we're going to minister to all of them.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
God bless you guys.
All right. Thank you. Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about.
I think we just we got two more races. I think we
Yeah,
want
on
to
the House
highlight
side.
before we and let me mention again. So someone just texted me and asked what they should do if they see something odd going on at the polling location. Here's what I would say is if you see something odd going on, one, it's probably not anything nefarious. The people running the polling locations here in Iowa, they're our friends, they're our neighbors. This is not their full-time job. This is not their day job. You can call the Iowa Secretary of State's hotline, which is 1-800-SOS-VOTE, or they have on their website, they have a form you can fill out. So if you see something, definitely say something. But again, it's probably not nefarious in Iowa. We have a very good system here. And again, they are our friends and neighbors. And for some of them, this is their first time running the election. So.
And I would say alongside with that is I've already had some phone calls, not from my county, but from other counties. And the Secretary of State's office responds immediately. And there are poll watchers from both parties out there. It's a pretty closely monitored process here in Iowa. So I totally agree with your assessment on that. But let's talk a little bit more about some more races.
Let's talk about your neighbor to the north. So this is House District 52.
This has been a fun race.
This race encompasses Marshalltown, and then we got the four smaller towns just to the south of it. So Republicans didn't have a nominee here. They didn't have anyone running for the nomination.
Which really has been surprising. When you look at the numbers on the ground, this has been a seat we could have pursued 2 elections ago.
It's a very winnable seat. Sue Cahill, the incumbent there, God bless her. There's some people you look at on one party or the other that you're like, that person's a real talent, right? And Sue Cahill's a nice lady, but she's certainly not one of the best talents that the Democrat Party has to offer. And so you do wonder why Republicans have left that uncontested. But this year, David Blom was nominated at convention. And I think I speak for most people when we didn't really expect that seat to be in play, but David has worked incredibly hard, and looking at the expenditure reports and the early vote numbers, it is very clear that this seat is very much in play. And one of the things that I think stands out about this seat is it's one of those seats where Trump on the ballot has actually helped Republicans. Right. If you go back to 2008, 2012, this is a seat that Obama did very, very well in. But you look to Trump, and all of a sudden that changed pretty rapidly. And so I think that David has a real shot here. We've endorsed him at the Family Leader, and I'm very excited to see where this race goes tonight. I think he's got real potential.
So from your perspective right now, you would say, hey, this at least leans somewhat Republican in your mind?
I would say this is a pure toss-up seat.
Pure toss-up. Okay.
Again, right, this is a seat where the Republicans have not played in the past, so we don't have really any historical data to help interpret what we're seeing now. What we're seeing now is encouraging, but there are definitely enough unknowns, enough gray spots in the data that, Sue Cahill can definitely get reelected, right? As I said, she's not in leadership in the Democrat Party, not like one of their frontline people, but she's a longtime teacher in the community and someone who does have a pretty built-in name ID. But again, if you know someone in this precinct or in this district, shoot them a call, shoot them a text. I can say, I actually have had the opportunity to personally know David for close to a decade now, and I can say for a fact that he's someone that, if elected, is going to work his butt off for the state and is a professional. I think we've discussed this personally, that sometimes, again, speaking as Republicans, our party, we tend to nominate just the most inflammatory person who says the spiciest things just for the clicks and to own the libs. That's not who David is.
Yeah.
David is someone who's invested in getting things done and doing what's best for the people, regardless of what the party says, regardless of what special interests say.
In fact, that just reminds me, the races that your department, and thus the Family Leader C4 has entered into, you had certain criteria.
Mm-hmm.
You were looking for someone who honored God, that's with their life and with their views. You were looking for someone who demonstrated an ability to be effective as a potential leader and a legislator, could get things done, could actually rally people toward a particular cause. And then thirdly, we just didn't enter into any race. You entered into races where you felt that we could make a difference, where you felt like this was a tight race. It's the Bill Gustoff race. It's the Brad Zahn races. It's the
David Blum
races.
The Ryan Weldon race.
Ryan Weldon race. Okay, Ankeny here.
Yeah, so Ankeny is fascinating, right? You go back a decade ago, and it was solidly Republican.
And this is one where the top of the ticket's making a difference.
The top of the ticket's making a difference.
Maybe not
Representative
the right
John
way.
Landon, Representative Kevin Kester both represented Ankeny for quite some time. That has changed. It changed most drastically in 2022 when Democrats won both of the seats by incredibly narrow margins. House District 42 to the south, I believe it was less than 30 vote margin. 41 was around 100 vote margin. Now, what makes Ankeny interesting is you've got a lot of people moving in there every single day. Nobody is from Ankeny.
So it's constantly changing.
They're all new transplants. They're all constantly moving there. And Ryan Weldon is someone that we've endorsed. And looking at his track record, he was the president of the school board there, has demonstrated that sort of leadership, those sort of leadership qualities that we want to see in candidates. Someone who's soft-spoken but gets the job done. and is not a flamethrower. And, you know, there's a certain level of you need a legislator that fits the district, right? If you're up in Northwest Iowa and it's 80% Republican, you might want a legislator who's a little more of a flamethrower because there's a lot of Republicans up there and that's what they want. But in a district like this, a very suburban district, that you want someone who's a little softer spoken, who's a little more focused on, a little more personable, a little more empathetic. And Ryan is definitely all those things. And the fact is, his opponent has pretty well voted with the Democrat Party line. And again, speaking on my own capacity, I think that Ryan would be a much better ideological fit for the district as well.
In District 41, at least from our observations and our work, there was still a significant number of undecided people that really were still trying to figure out which direction they were going to go when it came to this.
Well, again, so it's the double-edged sword, right, of having Trump at the top of the ticket. So we talked about that Marshalltown seat where Trump at the top of the ticket helps. These are districts where you don't have to be too bright to figure out that Trump is not necessarily
And that may
a
be
great help at the top
far
of the
more
district.
with the women vote.
The women vote, and again, there is a certain fact of personality that a lot of people dislike Trump's personality. And you know, I'm sure we have people on watching right now who would fall into that category. And I would encourage you, look, there are great people who their name's not Donald Trump. You know, they have an R next to the name, they have a D next to the name or whatever, but they are worth getting out and voting for. Because here's the deal: for people in Iowa, obviously it matters who's in the White House, but on some level it matters more of who's running your state.
Right.
You think back to where we were in 2020 and 2021 with the COVID. We saw that as a shining example. How different would our state have been if Fred Hubble had been governor, or if Democrats had been in control of the legislature?
How different would our state be going through unbelievable increase in costs, inflation, if we didn't have a tax rate that dropped down from 8.53 to a 3.85?
I mean, it would have been absolutely. Go across the border to Illinois. That's how you'll find out where it's like. Or go north to Minnesota.
Yeah.
You see what the Democrats have done there in changing. And again, right? Obviously, the Family Leader, we're a nonpartisan organization, but it is clear that one party nowadays has definitely led with passing the sort of legislation that is not pro-family and that we don't support. And we saw that on full display in Minnesota the last 2 years with the sort of legislation they've passed. So again, it is so important. Again, you don't have to love Donald Trump. You can lead that spot plank. That's fine. Again, if Trump needs Iowa, it's too late anyways.
Yeah.
There are so many seats that matter, whether that be Zach Nunn, Marionette Miller-Meeks, or one of these local state legislative races.
Now, Zach I know there's more House race to talk about, but Zach Nunn's race, he's a phenomenal campaigner. Nice strategy, working hard, has ability to get some crossover vote in terms of that. Feeling a little bit better about Zach's race?
I saw today Larry Sabato over at the Crystal Ball, who obviously I take with many heapings of salt these days. People throw around the term Trump derangement syndrome usually as a pejorative. I do think there is some truth to it that Trump's personality can cause you to lose a little bit of your best sense. And I think Larry has definitely, unfortunately, backed himself into that corner with some of the predictions that he's made. But even he moved to the 3rd district from toss-up to just lean Republican. So still very razor-thin margins.
So getting out and voting in that area would be extremely important.
Yes.
And again, this is where also you're seeing in these metro areas where the top of the ticket and the bottom of the ticket both have impact upon these U.S. congressional races.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's never done in a vacuum. It's one way or another. Any other House races?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're coming up on the
races?
1:30 timeline, so I kind of wanted to wrap it up. The big thing is, right, every vote counts.
Every vote.
If you want to talk about, especially at the local level, there's the race up in Dubuque. We don't have time to get to today. It's a rematch up there, but there was a House race that was decided by less than 100 votes. You have a House race in Council Bluffs that was decided by 6 votes.
Congressional race.
The congressional race 2 years ago for Miller-Meeks, or 4 years ago for Miller-Meeks, right? Even the House race for Zach Nunn was less than 2,000 votes. This 2 years ago, you've got this district here, 42, right? Less than 30 votes. we're going to see some of those. Those are going to happen. Don't let it be your district. Don't let it be that I stayed home, or you know what, I didn't text my friends from church. I didn't call my friends. I sat this one out. You know what, if you wake up tomorrow and your preferred candidate won by 500 votes and wouldn't have made a difference for you, good for you. But trust me, it's way better to wake up and be like, oh, I guess I didn't need to do that, versus waking up the next day and, oh, hey, look, my candidate lost by 3 votes. What could I have done? So don't let yourself wind up in that spot.
Extremely important. And I think as we kind of do wrap up here in the next couple minutes, remind ourselves that ultimately at the family leader here, our hope isn't in politics. It's certainly an area we want to influence, want to inspire the church to impact elections, influence policy. We want to ignite partnerships, all those things. But our hope ultimately is in the Lord Jesus Christ. And regardless of what happens after election night, the reality is we have the same mission.
Yep.
We're called to be witnesses and ambassadors. That doesn't change if one side wins and the other side loses. That never changes in terms of who we are. But close up, appeal, challenge that you have for us, Josiah.
So voterready.iowa.gov is the Secretary of State's website they've set up to help people find their polling location and other voting-related questions. So up in the right-hand corner, you can go to find your polling location. If you voted absentee and you want to make sure that the Secretary of State's office got it, you can click this link here. That'll allow you to track your absentee ballot. You can also find out with voting absentee what happens if they haven't received your absentee ballot. If you go there, track it, they still haven't received it, you still can vote with a provisional ballot. There's more details here. I'm not a lawyer, so definitely read the website before you make that decision. But find your polling location. If you're texting someone to remind them to get out to vote, text them a link to this site, easy link, voterready.iowa.gov. You know, all we can do is our part, and the rest is up to God. But it's the weird balance, right, of God's sovereignty and our responsibility. We got to do our part.
That's right.
We got to do our part no matter what. So turn out, vote, and make sure your friends and family, neighbors vote. And the sun will rise tomorrow.
Yeah.
God will still be in charge.
That's absolutely right. So thanks again for joining us for this hour and a half. I'm John Dunwall, the Director of Outreach and Engagement, the Family Leader.
And I'm Josiah Oleson, the Director of Elections, the Family Leader.
It's been good to be with you guys. Thank you. Have a great and fantastic evening.